is the Vintage RPG Podcast, your source for the best in classic and contemporary RPGs. With your hosts, Hambone and Stu.
Happy New Year and welcome to the Vintage RPG Podcast, coming to you again from the clubhouse hidden somewhere in the swamps of New Jersey. I'm John Hambone McGuire, and with me as always is the editor-in-chief of Unwinnable.com. He got bit by a spider when he was cleaning out the basement. It wasn't radioactive, didn't give him superpowers, so he had to go to the hospital. Stu Horvath.
Yeah, that's a lie, but it still captures the trauma of my basement problems of late.
It's the pains of being an adult. You want to have an extra game room that's wood paneled, you got to have contractors come to put it up.
Yeah, don't buy a house, folks.
Well, we're not going to so much talk about that on this episode. What we are going to talk about is the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game from the 80s. We're also going to talk about Blades in the Dark, which is something Stu's excited to run for some of his nearest and dearest compatriots. In the meantime, let's talk about the game Mysterium, which we finally got to play together last Friday night.
I feel like you missed out on that. It kind of had its heyday a couple Halloweens ago, and you just weren't around.
You know, at the time, I travel a lot for work outside of this, so I'm always kind of gone when the deal's going down. However, it's been nagging at me for months, and I keep seeing it on the shelf, and it's eyeballing me. And finally, I spoke fast enough, and before everybody else did, and I picked the game, and that game was Mysterium.
Yeah, you got to be quick. You got to get in before the food order.
That's the move.
Yeah.
So Mysterium is a cooperative game. Sort of. It's cooperative, and at the same time, it's also very competitive. Now, it's for 2 to 7 players. It came out in 2015. And what's cool about it is like Dixit meets Clue.
That is an excellent way to put it.
And it's something that's easy to get distracted with because the art's so good. Now, the story of this is 30 years ago, a servant was murdered in his employer's mansion during a party. A group of mediums organize a seance to solve the mystery. The ultimate goal of the ghost is to indicate who killed him, where, and with what weapon. So it does sound a lot like Clue.
Also sounds like my New Year's party.
This is very true. A series of illustrated cards are laid out for each of the 3 stages, 1 suspects, 1 locations, and 1 for murder weapons, and 1 person plays the ghost. Now, that's what I love about this game. It has its own ghost master. It didn't work, did it?
No.
All right, I'm just going with it. But you do get what looks like a DM screen that you, as the ghost master... Look, they don't all land.
No, it's good that they don't all land. Sometimes the not landing is funnier.
And our friend Ed was the ghost master. So here's where it's cooperative. Now, the person who is the ghost has to find these really beautiful, articulate pictures that somehow describe everything and somehow describe nothing and lay them out for their friends to figure out, okay, so it was this room, it was this weapon, it was this person. And in the end, you have to guess, just like Clue. You put the things in a little envelope once you figure out what room it was, and you call the person out. Now, it is very, very intense. Gameplay takes about an hour.
Well, usually. We were a little slow.
It was a little bit of us hemming and hawing through it. However, to kind of amp up the tension, there's an hourglass, and I'm here for it. I love the fact that they went above and beyond with this. Now, the artwork is top-notch. The gameplay is simple, and that hourglass really just kind of nudges and pushes on you because it makes you know that you have to make a decision fast. And sometimes that fast decision is not the right decision, which one of our friends, Josh, he got left behind up until almost the last round where he made a complete comeback, mostly because there was no cards left to choose from. So It was pretty much laid out for him right there.
Dragged him right across. But that's the thing, is that the ghost has to kind of convey a relationship between the cards he's showing you as hints and the cards that are laid on the table. And you have a selection of 6 or 7 potential people that you could pick. It's hard to figure out. It's a lot about your relationship with the person who's playing the ghost and the way they think about stuff. You know, I think we were sort of rusty with this, and we haven't played it a lot, so we were having a little bit of difficulty getting on Ed's wavelength. We didn't know if he was sort of like, is it the color, is it the actual objects in the card, or some sort of pattern? And once you figure that out, once you're on the wavelength, then you get it. But until then, it's just like, what am I looking at? It could be anything. And you're watching the sand go down, and you're just like, I don't know.
That hourglass teases you so. It's funny because after rounds had happened, we said, all right, Ed, you have to tell us, why this card. And when he explains it to you, you're just like, how the hell would I have gotten that?
Yeah, it's like you want to flip. Like, what are you thinking? Why did you think that sail meant cars or whatever? It's just, you make those decisions.
And a lot of times are the wrong ones. So this game is for 2 to 7 players. It is available where you find games. I will tell you there's a ton of replay value here because it could be a different room, a different murderer, a different weapon every single time. It's just like Clue.
Yeah.
Except it's like Clue on steroids. So definitely check this game out where games are found. It's fun for the whole family.
Yeah, sure. It's totally spooky and also confrontational. I feel like you're going to yell a lot at your friends.
Yes, you are. All right, Stu. So with that, why don't we get on to the main course of this podcast, which is the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game.
1984.
Oh, it was a good year.
It was. It was the period of time that I started reading comic books. I was not really a Marvel or DC kid specifically at this point. It was just, I had discovered the world of comic books.
Right.
And I feel like that's one of the things that really makes the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game special for me, is that it was a role-playing game about superheroes right at the moment that I was learning about superheroes.
Oh, absolutely.
So it came out in 1984. It was designed by Jeff Grubb, who did, Manual of the Plains, a lot of D&D work. And it's an interesting system. It's okay.
It's just okay.
I think it's just okay. It was a license. You could tell that they didn't put a whole lot of work into it. The basic, well, I can't call it the basics. I'm getting ahead of myself. The yellow box that came out in 1984 is a fairly simple set of rules. It's a percentile-based system, and you're intended to play not as your own characters, which is sort of unusual for TSR, but pre-generated characters, namely the Marvel superheroes.
Right.
Whichever one you want to play. Spider-Man, Captain America, whoever. And I think that as a kid, that wasn't what I wanted out of the game. I wanted a game that was going to be able to allow me to make a character that could go toe-to-toe with Spider-Man or Captain America or Wolverine. And I think that in not allowing me to make characters at that point in time, I was sort of like, oh, that kind of sucks. The system itself, fairly simple. Anybody can pick it up. It's very kid-oriented. This was like a beginner game. The system is the universal results chart is the central part of the system. It's a percentile skill-based system. You roll your percentile dice when you want to do something. You have 7 attributes.
Now, this is fun because I did a little research on this.
Oh, you got it there?
Yeah.
And right.
It's
because I don't remember them all.
How do they call it in this?
It's phase rip.
Yeah. So,
which is nerdy.
Which is so nerdy. It's so nerdy and I love it. And phase rip is just like the acronym for SHIELD, except it means fighting, agility, strength, endurance, reason, intuition, and psych.
I knew fighting and endurance. I didn't remember any of the others. Yeah, so you roll, your skill or your attribute, whatever you're rolling, and it tells you if you succeeded or not. Pretty straightforward, right?
Super easy.
1986, they released what they call the advanced set, which is the blue box.
Which is awesome for fans of the game because now we're getting a little more advanced. Now we're getting a little more dangerous with what we're doing, right?
Yeah. This is basically, if you think about it in terms of the Beckme boxes, the yellow box is equivalent to the red box D&D, and the blue box is equivalent to the blue box expert set D&D. It's an expansion of the rules. There's more situational stuff like drowning, falling from great heights, rules to help you figure stuff out if you need to. You don't necessarily need to, I don't think. You could probably just wing all of these situations, but I guess it's nice. Some people like having that crunch. The one thing that's really nice about the advanced box is that it introduces character generation in a more robust way. So like you can make your own superhero, which is great.
That's awesome. Which is baseline what we wanted to do as kids. I mean, what we did as kids, we're always creating our own heroes when you're a little kid growing up. This is like Cheese Fart Man or whatever.
Dorito Dude. I can picture the costume already.
It's
like
fantastic.
In Cool Ranch. So weird thing, though, a couple years later in 91 or 92, they come out with a redo of the yellow box, and they call it the basic box. It's the same rules, but they just named it basic, like 6 years after they put out the advanced box.
So they went back to basics after the advanced box?
Yeah, they went back to basics. You coined a phrase there, I think.
I did. Yeah, I just took it to handball in school.
Yeah, this was very confusing when I was doing the research for the post on the Instagram this week. I couldn't understand why this yellow box had a date on it that was so much later than the advanced box. It just didn't make any sense to me.
None
It drove me crazy.
whatsoever.
So one of the cool things about this is that they had a lot of support from Marvel in putting, well, I don't want to call it support, but Marvel gave them a lot of stuff. They filled the books with illustrations. They credit it to the Marvel bullpen. So it's
wow.
all of this black and white art that, it just looks like that particular period, I feel, is like a very clean and iconic moment for Marvel.
Iconic. I also want to use the word, I shouldn't use the word, but I'm going to say it, wholesome.
Yeah.
There's something very wholesome about it. I mean, think about the time period. This is before, X-Men #1 came out again, and it was very sexy and very like electrifying with the kind of art. And before, like, you had Todd McFarlane drawing things where, things were just really Spawn-like, I guess is the best way I could describe it.
I don't want to call it dark, but it was definitely like veering towards a more mature sensibility.
Getting a little edgier. Whereas, say, this game is out during the 1987 Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade where Melba Moore is singing I Need a Hero, and you have everyone in like picture perfect Marvel superhero outfits.
Like the squishy ones, right?
Like the squishy ones.
Yeah.
Did you ever see it? Did you ever see this?
I've seen that, yeah.
Oh, God.
It's amazing.
So for people
It's
listening
like
at home,
makes your heart grow 2 sizes.
it's so awkward. And Willard Scott is the one who's introducing it, and he just gets it all wrong. He just gets it all wrong. But folks, go on YouTube and check it out. It's easy to find. The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade float, 1987, Melba Moore singing I Need a Hero. There's Doctor Strange. There's Doctor Doom. There's Magneto. There's a dude in a spot-on Wolverine costume.
Yeah.
Silver Surfer running around without a surfboard because it's on the streets of Manhattan. Spider-Man, of course.
Of course.
Big, bulky Hulk. It's something that, pause the show, go watch this. It's like 3 minutes long. Come back and listen to the rest of this podcast. You're going to love it.
So, yeah, that is kind of the vibe, though, right? And
Exactly.
one of the things that I really love about this system is they came out with basically what amounted to the guidebook to the Marvel Universe, except it was role-playing stats.
Right.
So it was all the superheroes and villains in loose leaf sheets and with RPG stats and histories, and it was great. So the first thing was 4 volumes, and then I think there's 4 or 5 annual updates. So,
Right.
it takes into account like the Hobgoblin story, like who is Hobgoblin? They deal with that in game terms.
it's so cool.
I know, it's so cool. But you can see once they start introducing, the Liefeld and the Lee stuff, that it doesn't fit anymore.
Right.
Like there's like a tonal shift that the game doesn't play well with that stuff.
Right.
And I think that's super interesting.
And as fantastic as Jim Lee's art is, there is that art and then what you got in the model sheet handbook of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah.
In all those different volumes. It's very, very stark in contrast.
Yeah. And there's also just a consistency across the board with all of the art that they worked with. It's all credited to Marvel bullpen artists. And I think that they've sort of had a house illustration style. Personal style was kind of kept out of it a little bit.
I would agree with that. It definitely looks like someone showed up bright-eyed and bushy-tailed in New York and was like, I want to draw Spider-Man. And they see how he draws Spider-Man. It's like, oh, you draw Spider-Man just like this guy. Okay, you're in.
Yeah.
Just do it that way.
Just do it that way.
Do it the Marvel way.
Exactly. And that's sort of what it looks like.
Right.
Those old Stan Lee, like, draw the Marvel way.
Yeah.
Is that how it's called?
Yeah. How to draw comics the Marvel
How
way.
to draw comics the Marvel way, yeah.
Yeah.
And it has that kind of Spider-Man in the basic box is like narrating the rules to you. And it's just so hokey.
Oh, it is.
I love it.
It's so, when I opened that box, because I did finally open the box after years. When I first saw it, I was like 6. There was a game store in Fairfield, New Jersey. And when I said games and hobbies, I meant they sold pool tables. Basically, it was
Gotcha.
for like people who were creating their own man cave back before they called it a man cave.
Don't call it a man cave.
Don't call it a man cave, folks. However, I was walking around there with my dad. I think he maybe wanted to buy a pool table at the time. And I walk into the section that says games. And I'm thinking I'm going to see your typical Milton Bradley fare, your Parker Brothers. And here is this stark yellow box popping off the shelf. And it was the Marvel Superheroes role-playing game. And I was like, I want this, Dad. I want this. Got the guy to pull it off the shelf. And I'm shaking the box. And it doesn't sound like there's any figures or toys in there. It just sounds like a lot of paper flapping. And the guy's like, what are you doing? I was like, oh, I want to see how many superheroes it comes with. And the guy was like, yeah, this might not be the game you want, kid.
Theater of the mind, kid.
Yeah, and at that point I'm 6. I don't understand theater of the mind. I need my Secret War Spider-Man, my Secret War Doctor Doom with the shield that made the little flickering images, and so I didn't get it that day. So I finally opened it up. I mean, this is like 34 years later. And I'm opening it up because I did an unboxing video for our Patreon. So if you guys want to see that unboxing video, definitely check out our Patreon. And I was thrilled with what I found inside because everything that we're describing right now is exactly how this box looks. And there is Spider-Man, and he is kind of guiding you through how to play the game, and he's popping up here and there.
It's like hanging out with the Watcher.
Just hanging out with the Watcher, just for funsies.
Yeah.
It reminded me of the first Marvel superheroes trading card set that came out in the early 90s.
Oh, yeah.
Which was just like perfectly over the plate, like stock art and art that came like from a couple issues and a couple panels.
Yeah.
You know, Spider-Man's telling jokes on the back of every card. That is how the game is explained to you by Spider-Man.
This sounds so stupid, but like if you look at it on the shelf, there's something about the color yellow of that box that just grabs your eye and refuses to let go. And yellow isn't a color that I generally consider, you know, a comic book color. I think of red, purple, green, but yellow. It looks like a hot dog truck, sort of, but it's like it screams Marvel Comics.
It really does.
For some reason.
It screams four-color fun.
Yeah.
And to think that they didn't want to put Wolverine in the actual yellow costume in the movie. Shame on you guys.
God.
People want to see it, and your eyes would not have been able to take their ways off of it.
They never did get him in that costume, did they?
Yeah, they made like a clip in the end of, I think, like the second Wolverine movie where he opens the box, he sees it, he never puts it on.
Of course not.
Terrible. Tease us like that.
Anyway, Wolverine was my favorite superhero back in the day.
Yeah, and he's fully brown costume in this game, and I love it.
I love the brown costume. It's so ugly. The yellow and blue is not a pretty costume either, but the brown costume is just not superhero costume at all.
Oh, no, not at all. It's funny because in the Rick Remender X-Force series, they put him in like a black and gray or like a black and black tone, Wolverine outfit. And I'm like, all right, I get it. That's a little more, what you'd expect for, the best there is at what he does, and what he does isn't nice. However, man, that brown costume.
The brown costume's the best. It's the best, worst thing ever.
Like, when someone kills you wearing that much brown, you kind of deserve it.
Yeah. But that's the beauty of that costume, is that Wolverine is just, he's like a caricature of just awesome.
Right.
Like he's just so awesome.
They had to take him down a peg.
It's his leveler, his equalizer.
Yeah.
He wears brown.
He wears brown.
Like the same brown suit that you see at like the track.
Yeah.
That's the color of it.
Yeah. Washed up in broken dreams.
But I feel like we've digressed.
Yeah, so I finally opened the game box up, and it's great. There's tons of full color maps inside of it, which is cool because it does give you like a map of the city.
Yes.
With different buildings. And then there's a TSR building. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, because they had to.
The maps are great.
The maps are so good.
Super detailed. Like you get a really good New York vibe off of them.
And the character chits are really cool too, because one side is the hero or villain, the other side is their secret identity. You have the best of both worlds. For something where I'm a kid and I'm shaking a box looking for figures, there was a lot of heroes and villains in this box that 34 years later I'm looking at going, oh man, that was actually pretty cool.
Yeah, the advanced box has a lot of cardboard standees where you cut them out and fold them up into a triangle. And
right.
Those are great too.
That's super cool.
My favorite is the Invisible Woman has like a blank square. It's just like such a dad joke.
And that's why I don't feel bad about calling it wholesome anymore.
Yeah, no, it totally is. It totally is. I feel like we should play this at some point.
You want to play it? We can play it.
I do. I don't want to make my own superhero now, though. I just kind of want to play Captain America.
Isn't that funny? As a kid, we're creating all our own heroes, and we want a game where we can play our own heroes, which for folks, if you do want a game where you can play your own heroes, GURPS.
Yeah.
GURPS, Steve Jackson's GURPS, great system. Able to play it, no problem. You could still find it pretty much anywhere.
Yeah, lots of crunch, lots of scalability. It's a good system.
That said, at 40, I'm kind of like, man, I don't have time to roll up a character, come up with an original idea, and here it is. I could play Spider-Man, I could play Daredevil, I could play The Thing, which I'm psyched on.
I don't want to invest my cleverness in like coming up with a cool off-brand superhero. I just want to play the real thing. I want to play Wolverine.
There you go.
In the brown suit.
In the brown suit. So, Stu, do you have any final thoughts on the Marvel superhero role-playing game?
I don't. I just kind of want to play it. I feel like I want to investigate this further and I want to fiddle with the system and see what it's like before I pass judgment on it.
All right, folks, so you heard it here first. We are going to play the Marvel superhero role-playing game, and we're going to do another episode where we really dive deep into the game mechanics and how to play this game because, man, I want to play it too.
We'll get a one shot and we'll find one of the modules. We'll play it. It'll be cool.
All right, folks, so that is it for the Marvel superhero role-playing game. What we're going to do now is shift a little bit over to Blades in the Dark.
Oh, yeah. So my friends at Unwinnable have asked me to run a game online, which is terrifying, honestly. So the game that we settled on is this game, Blades in the Dark. It's from Evil Hat Publishing. It is described as powered by the post-apocalypse. So Apocalypse World is a storytelling RPG engine by Vincent Baker. He licensed it out. It's called Powered by the Apocalypse. It has some distinct features in which your characters have sort of a toolkit. Moves is what the thing is. So like something happens, you look at your move book and it tells you how to resolve it. So it's very modular. People have since started using that in their other games. It's called Powered by the Apocalypse. Blades in the Dark was envisioned as a Powered by the Apocalypse game. Once they kickstarted it, it got to be a little bit more elaborate. So they called it Powered by the Post-Apocalypse, or people have called it that anyway. But it's a super cool game. It's a heist game. Hambone, it's a heist game.
Stop. You had me at heist.
So it's a dark, sort of, dare I say, slightly steampunk, even though my views on steampunk are well known.
That's one of your 7 dirty words, Stu.
Absolutely. But it's got like sort of the Dishonored vibe, Fafford and the Grey Mouser. You know, the world is dark. You know, the sun has gone out. You're in a grimy, polluted city. And, you know, there's magic and ghosts howling outside the boundaries and all that stuff. But essentially, your players are a crew. There's 7 or 8 different types of person you could play, from, you know, your hunter type to your spy to your conspiracy person, all of these things that you could, you know, put together your crew with.
Right.
You build a hideout together and then you basically run heists.
That sounds perfect, except for the whole sun being out thing. My seasonal depression, I'm already dead. Just baseline.
And the other cool thing is, so you plan the heist and you enact the heist, right?
Right.
So the very cool, and I can't wait to see how this plays out, mechanic is, let's say, Hambone, you're walking down the hallway of this building that you've cased out, right?
Right.
And a guard comes down the other hallway and you run into each other. This is not planned, right?
Of course not.
And you're a little taken back. However, flashback, you already dealt with this guy 3 days ago. So when this thing happens in real time, you could just be like, okay, we're going to flash back to the time, you know, how I bribed this guy to make this okay. And then you go back and you role play that. And we figure out how that happens. And then you see how it pays off, right?
Right.
So cool, right?
So that's very cinematic. That's very like my favorite TV shows.
Yeah. So like you could totally be like,
Like
you know,
putting leverage in the apocalypse.
exactly. It could be anything from like you bribed him to you like you killed his family. Like it could be anything you want.
Well, that's an escalation.
I mean, it depends on what you're stealing, I guess.
I guess.
It seems very cool, very streamlined to a degree. There's a decent amount of crunch to the rules, and it seems like it scales pretty well for not having to have, you know, everybody around a table,
Right.
which was something that I was looking for, which was a harder thing to find in a game than I expected.
Because there is a certain level of disconnect when it comes to playing over the computer with your friends. Now, there are systems like Discord out there that have made it pretty cool and pretty much easy to get together with a full role-playing group. There's a Roll20 app, which is awesome for getting together with your friends. This sounds like a great game where if you got a little bit of lag, or even if you had to keep the game going offline, you could do that by, you know, you just send someone a random encounter and say, hey, what would you do in this situation?
Exactly.
And they kind of send it back and you can kind of narrate it for them in the moment, which also would speed up gameplay tremendously.
True.
Love it.
So when we were looking for games, Unwinnable is a bit of a group of weirdos. So one of my players, David, was like, what's the weirdest role-playing game out there? And I was just like, it's a game called Numenon. Well, I actually covered it a couple weeks back on the feed. And so he's like, we should play that. It's the weirdest game out there.
It sounds it.
That's the one that we should play. I was like, we can't. And he's like, why? I was like, because you resolve conflict using dominoes, and that's impossible without having everybody around the same table.
That is tough.
So it's just like, the more dice that you have to roll, I find it to be more difficult to run a game online.
Right.
Not having ever done it, but I think that that's a hurdle that I don't want. I want to minimize that. And this seems to be a good middle ground.
Very cool.
Once we play a couple sessions, I'll report back and we'll tell you all about it.
All right, Stu, that sounds great. So let's definitely bring this back up again after you have a few sessions under your belt, because I am so curious to see how this turns out for you and Team Unwinnable.
It's a heist. You love heists.
Sold American. So that is it for this episode of the Vintage RPG Podcast. Stu, where can people find you?
You can find me on unwinnable.com, where I do things with words and ideas. And you can also find me on Instagram, of course, at VintageRPG.
You can find me on Instagram at John Hambone McGuire, where my feed consists of my adventures and all the podcasting I do, which is a lot these days. You can also check out my other podcast, My Thai Happy Hour, wherever podcasts are found. So for Stu Horvath, I'm John Hambone McGuire. May the dice always roll in your favor.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like, review, and subscribe to the podcast. Every review helps other listeners to find us. The Vintage RPG Podcast is a ham-fisted production. Music by Dego West. Art by Schaefer Brown. If you like the podcast, you should also consider becoming a patron at patreon.com.